Have you ever walked into a room in your home and felt like the walls were closing in on you? Not because of space, but because of all the things you've accumulated over the years. I used to feel that way every single day. Every drawer I opened, every closet I peeked into, it was like a little avalanche of memories, gifts, papers, and items that I didn't even use anymore, but couldn't bear to part with. I thought holding on to them was honoring the past, honoring the people who gave them to me, or proving that my life had meaning. But over time, I realized something startling. All that stuff wasn't honoring anything. It was weighing me down, quietly stealing my peace of mind, and even affecting my energy. I felt guilty at the thought of throwing things away, like I was betraying memories or throwing away pieces of my life. It kept me stuck, anxious, and honestly, a little sad. One morning, I stood in my cluttered living room and asked myself, why am I letting these things control me? That question changed everything. I discovered a step-by-step way to let go without losing the memories, without feeling guilty, and without feeling like I was discarding decades of my life. Today, I want to share exactly how I transformed my relationship with my possessions, found freedom in my home, and started feeling lighter, calmer, and happier after 60, and how you can do the same. Whether it's that stack of old letters, a drawer of unused gadgets, or clothes you never wear, you'll learn a gentle, senior-friendly approach to letting go while honoring the life you've lived. Before we go on, tap that hype button. Help seniors like us share our stories and rise to the top. I'm Octavia Winslow, 67, a retired teacher, and for as long as I can remember, I've lived surrounded by things. Things that told the story of my life, things that were supposed to bring comfort, and things I thought I couldn't let go of. My home is a cozy 3-bedroom house, filled with the memories of decades. Shelves lined with books I never read again, drawers full of clothes that no longer fit but held a story, cupboards stacked with kitchen gadgets I thought I might need someday. Each item felt important, like a chapter in my personal history, and for years, I equated letting go with losing pieces of myself. I feared that discarding something would be like discarding a memory or betraying the people who gave it to me. I kept every birthday card from my students, every handmade gift from my children, every souvenir from trips I took, even those tiny, seemingly insignificant things that nobody else would notice. Over time, however, I began to feel the weight, not just the physical weight of all those possessions, but the emotional weight. Walking into my living room used to feel comforting, but slowly it began to feel stifling, like I was trapped under a mountain of stuff. I realized that while I was clinging to these objects, they weren't giving me joy, they were stealing my peace, my clarity, and even my energy. I couldn't move freely in my own home, and I couldn't think freely in my own mind. That's when I knew something had to change. I started observing myself, noticing the little pangs of guilt when I even thought about throwing something away, and the way I would justify keeping things I didn't use. And yet, I also realized that if I could learn to let go without losing my memories, without feeling guilty, I could reclaim my space and my freedom. Over time, I discovered simple, practical, and surprisingly gentle ways to release my attachments, honor my past, and still feel deeply connected to the memories I cherish. Now, I want to share with you the exact steps I followed, the step-by-step process that helped me stop feeling bad about throwing things away after 60, so you can start feeling lighter, freer, and more at peace in your own home too. Step 1. I faced the guilt. Every time I even thought about tossing something out, it felt like a tiny battle was starting inside me. There was always that little voice whispering, "You shouldn't. What if someone gave this to you? What if it's needed later?" It wasn't just a fleeting thought, it was a wave of guilt, a reminder that I was somehow betraying my past, the people I loved, and the memories that had shaped my life. For years, I let that voice win, holding on to things I didn't use, things that didn't even bring me joy anymore, simply because I was afraid of feeling bad. It was exhausting, and over time, I began to notice how heavy it made my home feel, how cluttered my mind became, and how much tension I carried without even realizing it. One day, standing in my living room, surrounded by piles of papers, unused gadgets, and drawers stuffed with clothes I never wore, I realized that this guilt wasn't protecting anything, it was imprisoning me. That was the moment I decided I had to face it. I had to confront the guilt directly, instead of letting it control me silently behind the scenes. I started by naming it. Every time that voice popped up, I would pause and say aloud, "This is guilt. This is nostalgia. This is fear of waste." Giving the feeling a name made it tangible, separate from me, something I could observe rather than something I had to obey. It wasn't about denying my emotions, it was about acknowledging them, understanding them, and deciding that I didn't need to let them dictate my choices anymore. I also realized that this guilt often came from imagining the reactions of others. What would my children think if I threw this away? What would my friends think? I learned to silence that imagined judgment. I told myself, "Octavia, you are allowed to make decisions for your own well-being. You don't need to carry the weight of everyone else's expectations." The next thing I did was create small, intentional moments of decision-making. I would pick up one item at a time, feel the pull of guilt, and consciously let it pass, reminding myself that letting go didn't mean forgetting or dishonoring the memory. Over time, these small exercises built courage. I started to notice that the guilt, while still present at times, lost its power over me. It became manageable, something I could sit with, acknowledge, and release without spiraling into regret. That's when I first began to experience freedom. The kind of deep, calm relief that comes when you realize you don't have to hold on to every single thing to honor your life. Facing the guilt head-on didn't just help me declutter physically, it cleared the emotional clutter as well. It allowed me to create space for joy, clarity, and peace, transforming my relationship with my possessions in a way I never thought possible. And that, I realized, was the very first step in truly letting go and feeling lighter, calmer, and more in control of my home and my life. Step 2. I started small. After confronting the guilt, I realized that the thought of decluttering my entire home at once was overwhelming. It felt impossible. The sheer volume of things I had collected over decades made my chest tighten and my mind race. That's when I made a decision that changed everything. I decided to start small. I didn't need to tackle every closet, every drawer, every cupboard in one day. I chose to begin with items that were relatively easy to part with, things that carried little emotional weight but added to the clutter in my daily life. I started with old tissue boxes that had been sitting untouched for months, duplicate kitchen gadgets that I rarely used, and worn-out linens that no longer brought me comfort. At first, it felt almost strange to throw them away. My hands would hover over an item longer than necessary, and my mind would whisper, "Are you sure? Could you need this someday?" But then I reminded myself that this was the practice stage, the beginning of building courage and a new mindset. Each item I let go of, no matter how small, became a victory. I began to notice the relief I felt after clearing just one drawer or one corner of a shelf. The air seemed lighter, the space more inviting, and I could breathe a little easier. That small success gave me confidence. It reminded me that decluttering didn't have to be a monumental task. It could be manageable, even gentle. I started setting small, achievable goals. Today, I will clear this one drawer. Then the next day, I will tackle this cupboard. Each tiny accomplishment accumulated into momentum, and before I knew it, the process felt less scary, more like a series of small, intentional acts of self-care. I also realized that starting small gave me the chance to practice decision-making, learning to recognize what truly added value to my life and what was simply occupying space. It taught me patience, both with myself and the process. I discovered the satisfaction of making choices that aligned with my well-being rather than my fear or guilt. By breaking the task into bite-sized pieces, I turned decluttering into a daily habit, a manageable routine that fit naturally into my life. What once felt like an insurmountable mountain became a series of small, climbable hills, and each step forward reinforced my sense of empowerment and control over my environment. That simple shift, starting small, was more than just practical, it was transformative. It showed me that even the tiniest actions could create visible, meaningful change in my home and my mindset. I began to see that letting go could feel rewarding rather than frightening, and that even small victories could lead to a profound sense of freedom. What's one small thing in your home you could part with today? Share it in the comments. Step 3. I preserved memories. Letting go of things that held deep sentimental value was by far the hardest part of my decluttering journey. I had boxes of letters from students spanning decades, Handmade gifts from my children that I had lovingly stored away, old photographs, and small trinkets that seemed insignificant to anyone else but held entire stories for me. The thought of throwing these items away made my chest tighten, and I worried that I would be erasing the memories themselves. That's when I realized I needed a new approach, one that honored my past without letting it take over my present. I decided to preserve the memories digitally. I began by taking photos of each item that tugged at my heart. I photographed handwritten letters, capturing the little flourishes and notes in the margins. I photographed handmade crafts, knowing that the love and effort put into them would always be captured in the image. I even photographed small keepsakes, like a pressed flower from a student's graduation or a tiny ornament my granddaughter had made. Once I had the photos, I organized them into a digital memory album, categorizing by year, occasion, or relationship. This process allowed me to relive those moments anytime I wanted, without the physical clutter taking up space in my home. Surprisingly, this approach didn't feel like loss at all, it felt like liberation. I could revisit cherished memories instantly, share them with family members, and even look back with a sense of gratitude rather than attachment. Digitizing my keepsakes also gave me the freedom to release duplicates or items that were fading or damaged, knowing the essence of the memory was safely preserved. Over time, I noticed a shift in my mindset. The act of photographing and organizing my memories made me more intentional about what I kept in my home. I realized that the value wasn't in the physical object itself, it was in the story it carried. This understanding helped me let go of countless items that had previously caused me guilt or anxiety. Moreover, preserving memories digitally gave me a sense of control. I could curate the way I wanted to remember my past, revisiting joyful moments without being overwhelmed by physical clutter. It also inspired me to involve my family, sharing the albums with my children and grandchildren, who were delighted to see decades of memories compiled in one place. By choosing to preserve memories this way, I found a balance between honoring my past and embracing my present. It allowed me to let go with intention, clarity, and peace, transforming what once felt like a painful decision into a rewarding, empowering experience. In the end, I discovered that memories are never truly lost when we preserve them thoughtfully. They live on in our hearts, in our minds, and now, in my digital albums. Step 4. I reframed the guilt. Even after I started taking photos of sentimental items and letting go of things I didn't truly need, there was still a persistent undercurrent of guilt. It would surface in unexpected moments, like when I opened a closet and saw a box of gifts from decades ago or a stack of letters from former students. The old voice in my head would whisper, "You shouldn't throw this away. Someone gave it to you. You might regret it." I realized that if I wanted to truly feel free, I had to change the way I thought about letting go. So, I began asking myself a simple but powerful question: am I keeping this out of love or out of obligation? That question alone shifted my perspective. I started noticing how many items I was holding on to not because they brought me joy, but because I felt I had to, because of guilt, expectation, or fear of waste. Once I recognized that, I started to see letting go as an act of love, not just toward myself, but toward the people who might actually use these things. I began donating items to local charities, senior centers, and community groups. I realized that by giving these possessions a new home, I was extending their usefulness and bringing joy to someone else. Recycling old items, even when it felt small, became an empowering ritual. I understood that discarding something wasn't erasing the memory or the sentiment behind it. It was choosing to honor my own well-being, to make space in my home and my mind for the present moment. I also reframed guilt by reminding myself that my worth isn't tied to the things I keep. The memories, love, and life I've built exist independently of physical objects. By consciously deciding to release what no longer served me, I was practicing self-care. I noticed that as I reframed my thoughts, the act of letting go became lighter, less burdened, and even joyful. Objects transformed from chains of obligation into opportunities for freedom and clarity. I could breathe in my home again. I could walk past a cleared shelf and feel relief instead of anxiety. Every donation or discarded item became a reminder that I was taking control of my space, my choices, and my life. Reframing guilt also allowed me to stop procrastinating. Before, I would put off decluttering because I felt I had to prepare myself emotionally. Now, I approached each item with curiosity and intention, asking, does this serve me, or is it holding me back? The answer was usually clear, and my guilt began to dissolve. This simple mental shift, seeing letting go as a gift to myself and to others, became one of the most powerful tools in my journey. It changed how I interacted with my home, how I felt about my past, and how I embraced the present. For the first time in years, I felt truly light, free, and in control, and I realized that reframing guilt was not just about decluttering, it was about reclaiming my peace, one object at a time. Step 5. I made it a routine. Once I had confronted my guilt, started small, preserved my memories, and reframed my thoughts, I realized that the key to lasting change was consistency. It wasn't enough to declutter in bursts of energy or on random weekends. The clutter would always creep back, and the anxiety would return if I didn't make it part of my daily life. That's when I decided to make decluttering a routine, a gentle but intentional habit that could fit seamlessly into my day. I started by setting aside just 15 to 20 minutes each morning. Some days it was before breakfast, other days after my tea, but it was always at a predictable time, so my mind began to associate that moment with clarity and focus rather than stress. I didn't try to tackle my entire home or even an entire room. I focused on one drawer, one shelf, or one corner at a time. I would open a drawer, assess each item, and ask myself simple questions. Do I use this? Does it bring me joy? Does keeping it support my well-being? Items that failed the test were either donated, recycled, or discarded. Over time, these small daily efforts added up. What once felt like a monumental, overwhelming task became manageable and even enjoyable. I began to notice subtle but profound changes in my home. The air felt lighter, the spaces felt brighter, and moving around my house no longer triggered stress. I could find things more easily, and the very act of organizing gave me a sense of accomplishment that lasted long after the 15 minutes were over. The routine also shifted my mindset. Decluttering was no longer a dreaded chore or a battle with guilt. It became a form of self-care, a quiet daily practice that nourished my sense of order and control. I started looking forward to my 15-minute sessions, knowing that each one was a small investment in my mental and emotional well-being. It also gave me permission to take my time, to be patient with myself, and to acknowledge that change doesn't happen all at once. By making it routine, I removed the pressure of doing it all at once and replaced it with a sustainable rhythm that fit my life as a senior. Eventually, decluttering became second nature. I didn't need to force myself. It was part of my daily flow. I noticed that the lighter my home felt, the lighter my mind felt, and the calmer I became. Spaces I had long ignored became pleasant to inhabit, and I finally felt at peace in my own environment. This small, consistent habit transformed not just my home, but my sense of freedom and clarity. It reminded me that even short, intentional actions every day can lead to profound change, and that forming a routine is one of the most effective ways to reclaim control over your space and your life. Could you try a small 15-minute decluttering habit in your home? Imagine the difference it would make. Step 6. I celebrated every victory. As I continued my decluttering journey, I realized that one of the most powerful shifts in my mindset came from celebrating even the smallest victories. At first, clearing a single drawer or organizing a tiny shelf seemed insignificant, almost trivial. But I began to notice how these little actions made my home feel different, lighter, calmer, more open. I decided to treat each accomplishment as a mini celebration, a recognition that I was taking meaningful steps toward reclaiming my space and my peace of mind. After finishing a drawer, I would step back, look at the cleared space, and allow myself a moment of pride. I would say to myself, "Look at this, Octavia. You did it. You made room for calm, for order, for joy." It sounds simple, but this practice transformed the way I viewed decluttering. Instead of focusing on what I had given up, I focused on what I had gained: clarity, freedom, and a sense of control. I also started noticing the little sensory changes in my environment. The sunlight that streamed through a previously blocked window, The ease of moving around my living room without bumping into piles of forgotten items, the soft, welcoming spaces that invited me to sit and relax, all of these became reasons to celebrate. I even began to share my victories with friends and family, sending them photos of a newly organized shelf or drawer I had finally tackled. Their encouragement reinforced my sense of accomplishment and reminded me that decluttering was not a solitary effort but a journey I could feel proud of sharing. Over time, I noticed another remarkable shift. Letting go began to feel joyful rather than guilty. Where I had once felt anxiety, hesitation, or sorrow, I now felt satisfaction and delight. The act of releasing items became a positive ritual, a way to honor the life I had lived while making space for the life I was currently enjoying. Each small victory reminded me that progress matters more than perfection, and that even incremental steps can lead to profound transformation. I started keeping a mental log of these wins, taking note of how many drawers, shelves, or corners I had cleared each week. Seeing this accumulation of achievements built momentum and reinforced the habit of decluttering as a joyful, empowering practice rather than a burdensome task. Celebrating every victory also nurtured gratitude. I found myself appreciating not just the cleared spaces but the memories, experiences, and lessons behind the items I chose to release. By acknowledging both the past and the present, I cultivated a sense of balance and contentment that extended far beyond my home. In the end, celebrating every victory allowed me to transform what could have been a stressful or guilt-ridden process into an uplifting journey of self-discovery, freedom, and inner peace. It reminded me that each small step mattered and that honoring my efforts was just as important as honoring my memories. Step 7. I focused on others. As I became more comfortable letting go of my possessions, I discovered that one of the most transformative aspects of decluttering came from thinking beyond myself. Initially, the idea of parting with items, even small ones, felt selfish or uncomfortable. I worried that by giving things away, I might somehow diminish the value of my memories or the significance of the gifts I had received. But then I realized that my belongings could have a second life, one that could bring joy, utility, and comfort to someone else. I began carefully selecting items I no longer needed and finding local charities, senior centers, or community groups that could use them. Old blankets, clothing, kitchen tools, and even small decorative items found new homes, and knowing that they would be appreciated rather than wasted added a layer of satisfaction I hadn't anticipated. The act of donating turned what had felt like loss into an experience of generosity. Instead of clinging to things out of guilt or nostalgia, I was giving them a purpose, a second chance to make a positive impact. I noticed that this perspective changed the way I felt during the decluttering process. The sadness or hesitation that sometimes accompanied letting go transformed into anticipation and fulfillment. I felt connected not only to my own memories but also to the broader community, knowing that my actions could improve someone else's day or even their life. Over time, focusing on others also helped me understand a deeper truth. Possessions are not just about personal attachment, they can be instruments of joy, kindness, and support. When I gave items away, I experienced an immediate sense of relief and lightness, as if both my home and my heart were breathing more freely. It became a cycle of positivity. Each donation reinforced the benefits of letting go. Each item that left my home opened up space for calm and clarity, and each act of giving strengthened my emotional well-being. This focus on others also encouraged me to be more intentional about what I kept. If something no longer served me or added meaningful value, it became a candidate for donation rather than indefinite storage. By seeing the impact my possessions could have beyond my own walls, I found purpose in decluttering and a renewed sense of connection to my community. Over time, the guilt that had once dominated my decision-making faded completely, replaced by gratitude and joy. I realized that giving creates happiness not only for the recipient but for the giver as well. Letting go, when framed in the context of helping others, no longer felt like a sacrifice. It felt like a gift, a conscious act of care that enriched my life as much as it enriched someone else's. Have you ever donated something and felt lighter afterward? Share your story below. Step 8. I shifted my mindset. After weeks of facing guilt, starting small, preserving memories, reframing my feelings, establishing a routine, celebrating victories, and focusing on others, I realized that the most profound transformation wasn't happening in my home, it was happening within me. For decades, I had equated my identity with the things I owned. Every drawer, shelf, and closet felt like a reflection of who I was, a measure of my memories, my achievements, my relationships. Letting go of possessions had always felt like letting go of myself. But as I progressed through the steps, a new understanding began to take root. Memories, experiences, love, and the relationships I nurtured define me far more than the physical objects I hold on to. My sense of self wasn't tied to the material. It was tied to my life lived, the people I had loved and taught, and the moments I had cherished. Embracing this truth changed everything. I no longer felt guilty when I released items. I didn't need to hold on to every gift, every card, or every trinket to honor the past, because the memories themselves were alive in my mind and heart. Instead of anxiety, I felt liberation. I began walking through my home and noticing the openness, the sunlight streaming through now unblocked windows, the calm and order that had replaced the chaos. My home felt like a sanctuary, a space where I could think, rest, and simply be. The shift in mindset allowed me to see decluttering not as a task or a burden, but as an act of self-respect and love. I was creating an environment that supported my well-being, nurtured my peace of mind, and reflected the life I wanted to live now, not the life I had collected in objects over decades. This mental shift also carried over into other areas of my life. I became more intentional about how I spent my time, how I nurtured my relationships, and how I prioritized experiences over accumulation. Letting go of things became symbolic of letting go of fear, hesitation, and the weight of expectation. Each item released was a reminder that I was choosing freedom, clarity, and joy over clutter, obligation, and guilt. I discovered that mindset, more than anything else, determines how we interact with our surroundings. The physical act of decluttering was important, yes, but without shifting my mindset, the old patterns of attachment and anxiety would have returned. By redefining my relationship with my possessions, I finally felt empowered, capable, and at peace. For the first time in years, I truly felt free. My home wasn't just cleaner or more organized, it reflected my internal clarity, calm, and the joy of living intentionally. I realized that freedom is not about what you keep. It's about what you allow yourself to release, both materially and emotionally. Once I embraced this, I could fully enjoy my space, my memories, and my life, knowing that who I am is far greater than anything I could ever hold in my hands. If you're over 60 like me and struggling with letting go, I want you to remember this. The journey isn't about perfection, it's about progress, and every step forward matters. First, I faced the guilt. I acknowledged the tight knot in my chest, the voice that whispered I shouldn't discard anything, and I confronted it directly. Naming the guilt, understanding it, and separating it from my decision-making was the very first step toward freedom. Second, I started small. I didn't declutter the entire house at once. I began with manageable items like old tissue boxes, duplicate kitchen gadgets, and worn-out linens. Each small success built confidence, showing me that letting go didn't have to be scary or overwhelming. Third, I preserved memories digitally. Letters from students, handmade gifts from my children, old photographs. All of these could live on in digital albums, allowing me to honor my past without letting it clutter my present. Fourth, I reframed guilt as self-care. I asked myself whether I was holding on to things out of love or obligation and realized that donating, recycling, or discarding items is an act of generosity and care for both myself and others. Fifth, I made decluttering a habit. Just 15 or 20 minutes a day, focusing on one drawer or shelf at a time, created a sustainable routine that transformed decluttering from a chore into a joyful, empowering practice. Sixth, I celebrated every victory. Each cleared space, organized drawer, or newly freed corner became a mini celebration, reinforcing positive feelings and making letting go feel joyful rather than burdensome. Seventh, I focused on giving. Donating items to local charities or senior centers brought a sense of purpose and fulfillment, reminding me that the things I released could brighten someone else's life while lightening my own. And finally, I shifted my mindset. I realized that my identity, my memories, and my love for life are not tied to possessions. Releasing items allowed me to create a home that felt like a true sanctuary, calm, open, and full of freedom. Decluttering became not just a practical task, but an act of self-respect, intentional living, and emotional liberation. Before you go, here's how you can hype this video and support our community. Step 1. On your YouTube app, swipe left on the comment carousel until you see the hype button. Step 2. Tap hype. Step 3. Choose how many points you want to give. Remember, smaller creators get a bigger boost. Step 4. Confirm, and you're done. While you're at it, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. Remember, you don't need to hold on to everything from your past to fully enjoy your future. Start letting go today, embrace the freedom it brings, and feel the lightness of a home and a life filled with clarity, joy, and peace tomorrow. Each small step you take matters, and the journey toward a calmer, more intentional life can begin right now.